The world around us is speeding up. Everything is optimized, upgraded, replaced, refreshed. We live in an era where you can swap a phone in a day, change a job in a month, move cities in a season, and reinvent your public identity before the week is over. And in the middle of all that motion, one story keeps repeating so often, it has become a social pattern. You hear it in different countries, different ages, different income levels, different cultures. The names change, the furniture changes, the details change, the script stays the same. Picture a woman named Laura. Laura lives in a comfortable home. The life on the outside looks like what people call settled. There are routines, stability, family habits, shared responsibilities. Beside her is a man most people would describe as a rare find. His name is Daniel. Daniel is solid, not performative, not loud, not constantly advertising what he does. He just handles things. He shows up. He keeps his word. He doesn't create chaos and then call it passion. He picks the kids up on time. He remembers the details Laura cares about. He fixes what breaks, he earns, he protects, he organizes. He's not a storm, he's a structure. To their friends, Daniel looks like the ideal partner. He's the kind of man people say they want when they're tired of drama. But over time, to Laura, that same stability begins to feel stale. At first, it's subtle. Then it becomes a mood. Then it becomes an internal narrative. She looks at Daniel and doesn't see the man who built a life with her. She sees predictability. She hears jokes she can finish before he finishes them. She watches reactions she can forecast down to the second. She starts to interpret calm as dull, reliability as a lack of ambition, peace as a sign that something is missing. And that's where the trap begins. Because the modern world is extremely good at selling one specific idea. If you are not constantly stimulated, you are not truly alive. Somewhere along the way, good quietly became boring, and boring became unforgivable. Laura starts to believe that her life is passing her by, that somewhere out there beyond her calm home, there are oceans of intensity, fireworks, wild adventure, and the kind of romance that makes you feel chosen every single day, like it's day one. She doesn't leave because Daniel betrayed her. He didn't cheat. He didn't humiliate her. He didn't disappear. There's no dramatic scandal that forces her hand. She leaves because she wants a feeling, not a real plan, not a clear destination, a feeling, a mythical version of happiness that, in her mind, cannot possibly be built out of normal days. So she makes a quiet decision that lands like an earthquake. She's done. Paperwork, logistics, separation, a new apartment, a new routine, a new identity. At first, it feels like oxygen. The first weeks are intoxicating. No shared obligations, no compromise over schedules, no domestic responsibilities that remind her she is part of something bigger than herself. She can chase novelty whenever she wants. She can be spontaneous. She can be free. She mistakes the adrenaline of change for the presence of meaning. Months pass. A year, maybe more. Then one day she sees Daniel, not in the role she left him in, not as her husband, not as the man whose existence she took for granted. Maybe she sees him on a busy street. Maybe she sees him in a photo online. Maybe she hears about him through mutual friends. And the image hits her like cold water. Daniel isn't destroyed. He isn't falling apart. He isn't begging. He hasn't become a shadow. He looks better. His posture is stronger. His face is calmer. There's energy in him that wasn't there in the exhausted years of trying to keep a marriage alive alone. He looks like a man who has been forced through pain and came out more awake. And beside him is another woman. Let's call her Maya. Maya is looking at Daniel with warmth, respect, and that kind of genuine admiration that Laura used to have long ago before it turned into irritation, criticism, and emotional withdrawal. In that moment, something inside Laura breaks because she was sure her leaving would prove her value. She believed the pain she caused would validate her importance. She expected him to collapse, to chase, to plead, to demonstrate that without her, his world was over. Instead, she sees a man who accepted reality, rebuilt himself, and found affection elsewhere. And suddenly, the freedom she fought for feels like an empty room with an echo. The silence she used to dream about now feels hostile. The nights feel longer. The space feels colder. The independence doesn't feel like power anymore. It feels like being unchosen. That's where regret starts. Not the dramatic kind, the slow kind, the bitter kind. The kind that arrives when the brain can no longer defend the story it created. And if you look beneath the story, you find a psychological mechanism that explains why it happens so often today. It's called the devaluation of the familiar. In the early phase of love, the brain runs on dopamine and novelty. Everything is highlighted. Every small gesture feels oversized. A coffee in the morning feels like devotion. A walk in the park feels like romance. A simple, I thought of you, feels like magic. But biology is not sentimental. The brain adapts. Dopamine sensitivity normalizes. What used to feel extraordinary becomes expected. The human nervous system stops treating the same stimulus as a reward. 10 years later, Daniel's still making coffee. He's still showing up. He's still doing what he said he'd do. But Laura doesn't feel it. Not because it stopped having value, but because the value stopped being visible to her. His loyalty becomes background noise. His reliability becomes invisible. His steadiness becomes nothing. And that's one of the most dangerous illusions of long-term relationships. When something becomes guaranteed, you stop perceiving it as a gift. Gratitude gets replaced by expectation. Expectation gets replaced by entitlement. Entitlement turns into criticism, and criticism slowly poisons admiration. Then modern media adds fuel to the fire. Laura scrolls, and the internet serves her a perfectly edited parade of other people's highlight reels. Couples on beaches, gifts in luxury boxes, surprise trips. Just because roses. Big gestures filmed from flattering angles. Smiling faces under perfect lighting. What she doesn't see is the planning, the debt, the performance, the private fights, the emptiness, the transactional nature of many of those relationships. She sees the frame, not the reality. And comparison is brutal. It doesn't just steal joy. It rewrites your memory. It makes you question the value of what you have. It trains you to believe that if your relationship doesn't look like a movie trailer, it must be failing. So Daniel, who works hard, provides, maintains the home, and wants to spend a quiet evening close to his family, begins to look gray next to the filtered fantasy. Laura starts collecting his shortcomings like evidence. He didn't react the way she wanted. He didn't pick up on her mood fast enough. He didn't express excitement in the exact form she imagined. He didn't read her mind. And instead of addressing these gaps directly, she starts building a case in her head. The marriage is dead. The spark is gone. She deserves more. Then she finds the communities that validate her dissatisfaction. There are entire corners of the internet dedicated to one idea. If you are not being constantly delighted, you are being deprived. They tell her that a good partner should feel like endless euphoria, that peace is a warning sign, that stability is settling, that if she doesn't feel like a queen every second, she is wasting her life. They sell her a fairy tale, The world is full of men who combine perfect loyalty with constant passion, emotional mind reading, elite status, and endless novelty. They never mention the cost of that fantasy. They never mention that most men who can perform constant intensity are often unstable, narcissistic, or emotionally unavailable. They never mention that fireworks are easy for a month and expensive for a decade. Laura starts confusing calm with emptiness and stability with lack of love. And she misses something important about Daniel. The reason he doesn't constantly perform is because he feels safe. He's not trying to sell himself. He's not auditioning. He believes the home is a place where you can take off your armor. For a mature man, that's not laziness. That's trust. But Laura interprets it as him no longer trying. And she believes that if a man isn't constantly chasing, he doesn't care. So she leaves. Now here's the part many people don't want to hear, because it disrupts the story the culture likes to tell. At first, Laura's new life does give her what she asked for: novelty. New men are exciting because they are unknown. Compliments hit harder because they're new voices. Dates feel intense because the brain is back on dopamine. There's uncertainty again, and uncertainty creates obsession. She calls it passion, but what she is often experiencing is stimulation, not depth. And stimulation has a short lifespan. Soon, the real personalities show up. The charismatic man who made her feel desired turns out to be inconsistent. The mysterious guy turns out to be emotionally absent. The confident one turns out to be self-centered. The thrilling one turns out to be unreliable, impulsive, or addicted to attention. She learns a hard truth many people learn too late. People who are great at the beginning are not always great in the middle. Some men are experts at seduction, but amateurs at commitment. They can create sparks, but they can't build warmth. They can create a high, but they can't create a home. They can plan a dramatic weekend, but they won't show up at 3 a.m. when you are sick, exhausted, and need someone who doesn't need applause to care. And as the months go on, Laura begins to see the dating world outside her marriage for what it is. Not a garden of better options, but a market full of people protecting themselves, taking what they can, and leaving when responsibility appears. The emotional hangovers get heavier. She starts remembering the old life, but not the way she remembered it when she was bored. Now, memory becomes selective in the opposite direction. She remembers the airport pickups, the calm support, the patience, the way Daniel handled stress without making it her problem, the way he absorbed difficulty and still stayed kind. She realizes that what she called boring was in fact safety. The rarest currency in modern life is not excitement, it's peace. There is another painful layer here: the asymmetry of investment. In many marriages like this, one person gives far more than they receive. Daniel built his daily life around Laura. He shaped his time around her comfort. He sacrificed small personal desires to keep the home smooth. His effort became so consistent, it became invisible. Like electricity. You only notice it when it's gone. And psychologically, something strange happens when someone becomes too available. You stop treating them like a prize. This isn't noble, but it's common. Humans often value what feels scarce, what requires effort, what might be lost. When a partner becomes a guaranteed, immature psychology can interpret that as low value, even if the opposite is true. Laura treated Daniel like gravity, always there, always constant, impossible to lose. She didn't imagine that even gravity has limits if you keep pushing against it. Then the consequences arrive. Daniel doesn't just move on like a switch flips. He goes through pain. He goes through grief. He goes through nights where he questions his worth. He goes through the humiliation of being abandoned despite being loyal. But pain, if it doesn't destroy you, can refine you. He begins to remember who he was before he became a man, living entirely for someone else's approval. He rebuilds his body. He rebuilds his mind. He reconnects with goals that have nothing to do with being a good husband. And this is important for men listening. When you dissolve your identity into pleasing, you don't become more attractive. You become less defined. A man who has no mission, no boundaries, no self-respect, no standards, and no independent direction eventually stops triggering respect. Not because he's not kind, but because he's not solid in himself. Daniel starts becoming solid again, and that version of Daniel attracts Maya. Maya is not a naive girl chasing butterflies. She's often a woman who has already been burned by flashy, unstable men. She has learned the cost of chaos. She has learned that charisma without character is expensive. She has learned that intensity without consistency is a trap. So when she meets Daniel, she values him. She doesn't call his stability boring. She calls it strength. She doesn't interpret calm as weakness. She experiences it as safety. She doesn't demand a daily circus. She appreciates a man who does what he says. And when Laura sees that, she finally understands the scale of what she gave away. Not a husband who was safe but dull. A man who was rare. A life that was real. A foundation that took years to build. Now, this is not a sermon that says divorce is always wrong. Sometimes leaving is necessary. Sometimes staying is dangerous. Sometimes stability is just a cage because there is abuse, manipulation, or chronic betrayal. That's not what this story is about. This story is about a modern deficit, wisdom. Because the culture trains people to consume, replace, upgrade, and chase. We treat objects that way, and then we unconsciously treat people the same way. We start looking for better versions of partners the way we look for better versions of phones. We forget that relationships are not products. They are ecosystems. They are living systems built through time, shared history, conflict, forgiveness, and repeated choices. The deepest value in long-term love is not the outer shell, not the novelty, not the performance. It's the shared story, the private jokes no one else understands, the way you know each other's fears without being told, the way you can sit in silence without discomfort, the trust built through hard seasons, the invisible language that only two people who have lived together for years can speak. That kind of wealth cannot be bought, and it cannot be recreated quickly with a stranger. It is earned slowly, like craftsmanship. And when people destroy it chasing a fantasy, regret is often inevitable because they realize they didn't just end a relationship. They demolished a structure. Divorce is not only a legal change, it's a social earthquake. It affects children, families, friendships, finances, mental health, identity, daily routines, even where you walk, where you sit, what you cook, what music you can listen to without memory stabbing you. And once the dust settles, you realize something the culture doesn't like to admit. Building a new life is hard, and the results are often worse than what was destroyed. A new partner doesn't erase your patterns, it reveals them. Now let's talk directly to men, because there's a lesson here you cannot afford to miss. Many men think love means becoming everything. The servant, the entertainer, the therapist, the fixer, the wallet, the punching bag, the man who never says no, never disappoints, never has needs, never has boundaries, never has a separate life. They think that if they sacrifice enough, they will be appreciated forever. But excessive self-erasure often produces the opposite. It removes respect and attraction, not because women don't want a good man, but because a man who abandons himself communicates something silently. My value depends on your mood. That's not love. That's surrender. Healthy masculinity isn't dominance, it's groundedness, it's principles, it's standards, it's self respect, it's the ability to love deeply without becoming spineless. It's being reliable without becoming invisible. It's giving without becoming a tool. A mature man needs a mission outside the home, not because the family is unimportant, but because a man's internal fire cannot be sustained by domestic routine alone. A man who has purpose carries a different energy. It creates respect. It creates stability. It creates the healthy distance that keeps closeness from turning into a vacation. Distance, used wisely, is not disconnection. It is space for admiration to breathe. And to women who are tempted by the narrative that stability equals boredom, here is the reality. The human nervous system is addicted to novelty, but your soul is built for meaning. Meaning does not always feel like fireworks. Meaning often feels like structure, like routine, like repeating the same small acts of loyalty when no one is watching. If at some point your home feels quiet, don't rush to manufacture drama just to feel alive. Silence does not automatically mean love is dead. Often, silence means the machine is running smoothly. When a relationship is immature, it makes noise. Constant friction, constant uncertainty, constant emotional storms. When it matures, it often becomes quieter, not because it's dead, but because it's stable. A swamp is stagnant because nothing grows. Stability is quiet because growth has roots. A swamp suffocates. Stability supports. The difference is development. So evaluate honestly. Is your life quiet because it's safe and functional, or quiet because it's lifeless? Those are not the same thing. And if you're a man listening to this soberly, look at what you have. Strip away the internet's fantasy. Strip away the highlight reels. Strip away the cultural addiction to novelty. Ask yourself, is your partner loyal? Do you trust her character when life gets hard? Is she capable of gratitude or only consumption? Does she see your effort or only your shortcomings? And if you're a woman listening, ask, is this man reliable? Does he protect the home with his presence? Does he show up when it matters, not just when it's fun? Does he invest in real life, not just in appearances? If the answer is yes, you are holding something that is becoming rarer by the year. Because the grass is greener idea is one of the oldest and most destructive illusions humans carry. The grass looks greener from a distance because you're not close enough to see the weeds. You're not close enough to see the watering. You're not close enough to see the maintenance. Every field needs work. Every relationship needs effort. There is no escape from that. All you can choose is whether you water a garden you already have, or whether you burn it down and go searching for a miracle field that doesn't require labor. Novelty shines bright for a short time. Then reality arrives, and reality always sends a bill. Real mature love is not a constant emotion that falls on you like a wave and stays forever. Real love is a decision, a practice, a discipline. It's waking up and choosing respect when you could choose contempt. It's choosing communication when you could choose silence. It's choosing to repair when you could choose replacement. It's choosing to see the best in someone, even when life is gray and nothing feels cinematic. It's understanding that relationships have seasons: excitement, routine, stress, rebuilding, renewal. You don't abandon a life every time you enter a season that isn't thrilling. You learn to navigate seasons like a man, like an adult with character. Because the most brutal tragedy is not losing love. The most brutal tragedy is realizing the value of love only after you've destroyed it. It's standing outside someone else's happiness, looking at what used to be yours, and understanding that your apology arrives too late. It's hearing cold silence where warmth used to live. It's realizing that another person now occupies the place you abandoned, not because the world is unfair, but because actions have consequences. Happiness doesn't always look like a party. Sometimes it looks like a calm home, a good night's sleep, a shared dinner without performance, a familiar hand that doesn't disappear when life gets ugly. That quiet harbor is what many people search for their entire lives. And when they finally find it, some people panic because peace feels unfamiliar to a nervous system trained on chaos. So don't let illusions sabotage your reality. Take care of the people who show up. Value loyalty while you still have it. Respect stability while it is still yours. Because the day you truly understand its price might be the day you can no longer buy it back. If this made you think differently about your relationship, your marriage, or the way modern culture manipulates our expectations, stay connected to the channel. Here, we break down the psychology behind human behavior. We analyze real life patterns without sugarcoating, and we learn how to build a conscious life based on reality instead of fantasies that destroy what matters most. Until next time.